you can write bullet points in the way that I'm about to show you, it makes them much more effective at getting through the computer screening process, as well as it makes them much more appealing to a human who might be reading your resume. Here's an example of a really well-written bullet point, and I'll break it apart so that you can see the elements that make it so effective. First of all, you start with the relevant skill. Now, this is optional. You don't have to put it here, but when you put it here, it lets the employer know this is a skill I have, and this bullet point shows how I've demonstrated that skill. Next, include an action verb. And I'll show you some examples of some good action verbs and some verbs that aren't as impactful. Then include the subject of the bullet point. This shows what you impacted with your action. And then finally, always try and end a bullet point with a result. Employers love results. They want to see examples of what you've done that have gotten results. Here are some really good action verbs. These are things that employers like to see because it shows that you can do things that they want you to do. Things like developed and creative, wrote, led, built, launched. You can almost visualize the person doing something that's impactful when you see these verbs. Some more really good action verbs are words like managed, analyzed, founded, organized, identified, published. These all imply really strong actions. Here are some examples of verbs that are not very effective. Verbs like participated. Rather than saying participated, like I participated in a conference, you should say something like earned. So I earned a certificate or I earned a degree. Instead of saying supported, say something like managed. So instead of supported executive, if you're an administrative assistant, say something like managed calendar or managed budgets or managed timelines. Instead of saying you attended something, say you led something. So you don't want to say I attended a conference, you could say I led a breakout session or I led a workshop. I don't recommend you use the word worked. I've seen resumes that say worked on this or worked on that, and worked implies that it takes you a lot of effort to do something. Instead, write something like developed. Tell them what you developed while you were at that job. Another verb that isn't very impactful is oversaw. So I've seen people say oversaw a process for blah, blah, blah. Oversaw doesn't imply that you actually did anything. Built is a really good action verb because if you built a new process, that shows you can create things. That shows that you can do more than just watching over things. And then examined implies that you looked at things. It doesn't imply that you actually accomplished anything. So I like the word identified better because if you can identify cost savings opportunities or if you can identify revenue streams, saying that you examined documents doesn't tell them that you've done anything that's had an impact. Saying that you've identified opportunities, that's where you show them that you can actually accomplish something. Here are examples of how somebody's used really good action verbs in a series of bullet points. They've said things like identified, managed, led, developed, presented. These are really strong and the employer can visualize this person accomplishing things. Next, let's move on to the subject of the bullet point. This is simply what you did. So you developed an advertising campaign, you led a workshop. You need a noun to explain what your action accomplished. Then move on to your results. And as much as possible, make your results measurable. If you increase sales, tell them how much you increase sales. If you identified cost savings, tell them how much those cost savings were. If you taught students, tell them how many students you taught, or tell them what the increase in the students' testing scores were. Try and end every bullet point with a result, and preferably a result with numbers, because employers love to see numbers on resumes. So that's how to build a really good bullet point. Start with the relevant skill, and preferably that's a skill that they list on the job description, and then include really impactful action verbs, include a subject, and then end your bullet point with a result. Remember, employers love to see applicants who can get results. So if you craft your bullet points like this, you'll see that employers are much more likely to bring you in for job interviews.